Hey everyone, I am Kat B.
And I'm Angel Street.
And we are the hosts of the webcast UFOT.
But we love coffee and UFOs.
Hi, I'm Stephen Bassett, Executive Director of Paradigm Research Group, and I'm a really big supporter of coffee and UFOs.
Hey, welcome back everyone to another episode of Coffee and UFOs, two of my favorite things. I have a fantastic guest with me, Alan Steinfeld. We'll be talking about his book, Making Contact, which I just recently finished, and it was a good read. He's the editor, author. There are contributors to this book about experiencers, close encounters, you know the like. So we'll get into it with Alan in just a moment. And fortunately, Alan spells his name the same way I do. I appreciate that. Alan Steinfeld is an experiencer of consciousness. For over 30 years, he has hosted and produced the weekly television series New Realities in New York City. Additionally, with 68,000 subscribers to his YouTube channel of the same name, there have been over 20 million viewers who have seen his programs. These include interviews with luminaries in the field of health, spirituality, UFOs such as Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Ram Dass, and every major UFO researcher in the field. For over 5 years, he has emceed the largest UFO event in the country, Contact in the Desert. Alan, how are you?
Good, and that event is coming up again,
Yes.
June 2nd, Indian Wells, which, I'm not the only MC and, host there, but there's a few of us because it's such a massive event. There's going to be over 50 speakers on maybe 5 different stages. It's like a circus going on there, but it's fun because it's the top event in the country for this type of it's not just the speakers, it's the community, it's the networkers, it's experiencers. There's an experiencer forum. So if you are interested in this, pick up my book. If you're interested in UFOs and coffee, I think they'll have coffee there as well as UFOs.
Okay. I hope so. Yeah.
And sit down with my book or come to the Contact in the Desert conference, which is really a fun event.
Are you a coffee drinker, Alan?
I am not.
You're
not a
not.
coffee
Okay.
drinker. It
Tea?
buzzes. I guess you are, right?
Oh yes, always prepared.
How much coffee do you drink a day?
Well, a lot less than I used to, actually. So I was like a double espresso multiple times a day kind of person, and I've really reduced that. I do probably about, I want to say, like 3 single shots a day.
That would keep me up for about a week. Serious. I'm too sensitive for caffeine. Although I've been doing a lot of cacao lately, which has been feel like a kind of mild stimulant, but not on the level of coffee.
Well, it's funny you say that because as I reduced my coffee intake, I have been nibbling on like cacao nibs and kind of working that into my diet a little bit as well.
Can I just ask you off for the topic, what do you feel is the difference between caffeine and cacao?
Well, cacao, you obviously don't feel that kick,
Okay.
but it does give you a lower level energy that sustains longer for sure. But I really do love the stimulant of the caffeine, particularly in the morning, to get up going. Because sometimes I'm not motivated to wake up and do all the things that we need to do, and just that coffee makes a difference.
Because that kick, I think I know what you're talking about, because I really haven't drank much coffee in my time, but it's too much. It's just like, it feels like, a sledgehammer or something in that kick. I don't know how people do that every day, because it's like, I don't know, I feel a little disconnected in a sense.
Yeah, if it's too much, sure. Like a double espresso in the morning is too much for me now. A single works. Yeah.
Guess whatever your body gets used to. So,
yeah.
I mean, but these are 2 of your favorite things. Coffee. We just covered the coffee pot.
We did, and now we're doing
coffee pot.
Yeah.
Coffee part, and coffee pot. And the UFO stuff things is what, we're both really excited about, because I was just talking to Stephen Bassett today. You know who he is?
Yeah, he's been on the show.
Yeah, well, he's so excited about what just happened with Gary Nolan. Did you hear that? Did you see that interview?
Oh, yeah, I sure did.
I'm actually going to be showing parts of that at Contact in the Desert because that is disclosure. That Gary Nolan said when he was asked, does he believe that that we've been visited by extraterrestrials? He says to this interviewer, not only that, not only do I believe it, they are here and they've been here for a long time. And then the interviewer there at the Salt Talk says, what probability would you have? I mean, he still doesn't get it, because it is such a hard thing to get because we're not talking science fiction. We're talking about a reality that it's hard for people to wrap their heads around.
Yeah. But the thing is, with Gary, he was at an actual like legitimate scientific conference.
Right.
So this wasn't just a podcast interview or the like. This was he was in
Right.
front of peers.
Yes.
And shared this information. And it was kind of hard to tell with the recording, but what I didn't hear was a lot of I didn't hear any jeering. And I didn't hear laughter, not really. I thought maybe I heard a little couple of light uncomfortable laughter, but for the most part, it was the audience took him seriously.
Well, I was listening for that too, what they call the giggle factor, and it didn't seem to be there because this was do you know what the Salt Talks are? I didn't know what they were either. By research, you have to pay like $20,000 to go to one of these 5-day conferences. So I think if they're bringing people in for these really high rollers to listen to, they're not joking around. So when someone and Gary Nolan's an immunologist, I think he was up for a Nobel Prize in medicine. I mean, he's a real legit scientist. When he says something like that, it's like that E.F. Hutton commercial. People listen. So it's like when he says that, not only are they here, but they've been here for a long time, which is exactly what he says in that interview. It's like, what? That does not fit into the reality we've been told. But I love it because people have to be shaken up. And I think there was some tweet that he said, if he's going to make a public statement, he's going to make as big a statement as he possibly can. This is what Nolan said. So I'm really excited. This really moves the ball down the field, as they say in the business,
Yes, but it is step by step, and I feel like by doing this, he's doing his part. He's doing what he can to keep the ball rolling. Of course, the counter argument for a lot of people is that he's just being fed bad information, that he's being manipulated, right? That's the counter argument.
That's the counter argument that doesn't hold water because he's in on the inside programs. I mean, I don't know how he was allowed to say it. That yes, they're here and they've been here for a long time. So he doesn't. I've met him and he's a really great guy, really independent thinker. He's not the kind of person, in my opinion, that looks like he was fed that to manipulate. He said it because he knew he was sitting in front of an influential group. And he even says this in his tweets, because I follow his tweets. Not that I'm a big Twitter thing, but follower. But he said, people took him seriously. People came up to him after. People wanted to contribute to this investigation. This was a big deal for me. This, I'm just writing about it as, reflecting on it. I have had my own experience, but this guy, Gary Nolan, Hal Puthoff, Louis Alexander, these are the insiders. John Alexander. These are the people one step removed, I think, from those keeping the secrets. I mean, so you have that inner group, and we don't know the names of that. Maybe they're connected to the Air Force or something. These are the people who probably will never know the names. And then there's the people they filter out their research to, like Hal Puthoff or Gary Nolan, and then you have the intelligence people like Louis Alexander and Christopher Mellon, and Mellon was in the government as a deputy defense secretary. But those guys are not making the policy. Those guys are pushing the envelope. So, I'm just talking about one aspect of the UFO. I call that the defensive side. There's offense and defense, in every ball game. That's the defense.
Well, what I've heard for years, And from friends of mine who are investigators or in the field, that there are generally two factions, right, behind the scenes, kind of working against each other.
Mhm.
One faction wants disclosure, the other says no, it's way too soon. But those are general terminology. That's general terminology, faction. So what is the faction? What do you suspect is, who knows behind the scenes that are having this kind of back and forth?
Well, that's what I was saying, sort of like insiders, maybe some people say the Air Force really has a lot of the secrets.
Mhm.
And you could read, actually, look up UFOs or UAPs on the Air Force website.
Mhm.
They'll talk about Project Blue Book, where they studied all these craft that come in and out of our atmosphere. And what they say, they never say they're extraterrestrial or not. What they do say on that website is that from what they've seen,
Mhm.
thousands of videos, they pose no threat to national security. That's so key, because in recent years, the excuse has been this is a national security threat. But
Mhm.
through the research that from Project Blue Book, which I think went from 1952 to 1969, there seems to them no national security threat. So what that means is there's a conflict inside those halls of government, that somebody's saying something, then you get Gary Nolan say, yeah, of course there's the ETs here and they've been here a long time. And so something is breaking up. The old story can't hold water anymore. Something is cracking in the infrastructure. And I have some clips I could show you, but then there was Sean Kirkpatrick. Do you know who he is?
Sure. Mhm.
He's the new head of the office that investigates UFOs. And he said in the press conference on April 19th, there's no evidence that these objects are extraterrestrial. And I would say to him, well, what evidence do you need? Is the fact that they can accelerate from 0 to 10,000 miles an hour, have no means of propulsion, that there's no country we know of that has such technology. I mean, those are the things that make it seem like, yeah, they're not from anybody we know. And
Mhm.
so there's a level of uh, not even implausible denial, I would say.
Yeah.
Implausible, because there's evidence of it being something else, and they're not acknowledging that. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, well, let's talk about your book too, Making Contact,
Mhm.
because that is, it seems, some kind of disclosure working behind the scenes with the general public.
Right.
It's a disclosure that seems to be coming allegedly from extraterrestrials, like
Mm.
their way of working towards the acclimation of our race to the reality of this, exo consciousness. So there are some great contributors to this book. You have Whitley Strieber. You have an old essay from John Mack, which you were able that had never been read
The
before. Yeah.
That was a real coup. I was really happy because I knew John Mack. I
Yeah.
mean, not
Yeah.
very well. I'd met him because I got into this whole thing in I would say the mid 80s, like really
Mhm.
dived in because I had an experience then, and I just went to every UFO conference I could from 1987 to the present, to where I'm going next week, where, people, Bud Hopkins I had met initially, and
Mhm.
it was one of his people that said, "Oh yeah, I think what happened to you is an alien abduction," where there was a mark on my leg. I had some missing time.
Mhm.
I felt like I was frozen in time space. I have it in chapter 7 of the book, and then I met other people. I just wanted to know what happened. Of course, I was already always interested in this. I love science fiction,
Mhm.
love Star Trek, the original, series in the 19 was that 70s, I guess it was
60s
60s,
early.
maybe
Yeah. Mhm.
60s, and obsessed with wanted to be an astronaut. I mean, there was something that was calling me, and looked at the stars. I mean, looked at the moon. I noticed that the moon was always full at a certain holiday, Passover. It's like, and I said, why is the moon? No one could explain it. No one was that aware of the tradition. It was just something you did with your family or something, but no one knew that Passover was really the first full moon after the spring equinox. And so it was a planting moon, the full moon after the equinox that marked a time where you plant, and the full moon's the best time to plant. So there was that organic culture involved in just observing the stars in the sky. And, the stars was the earliest calendar we had. And that's why the constellations and the zodiac was, named not so much to predict the future, but to see where you were in the present. The sky was divided into 12 different zodiac signs and 12 houses, 12 divisions, 30 degrees of a 360-degree circle, which I also think the days of the year were 360.
Yeah. Alan, your microphone got a little.
Sorry. Is
that low.
Is that better now?
There you go. Yep. That's it.
Okay. Sorry. Let me know if it drops out, because that's why I don't use this micro. It's a great microphone. I think it's the interface between the microphone and the computer that drops out. But let me know. So anyway, we have the stars and the sun and the moon as calendars. And then, people had thought, well, maybe certain times of the year affected certain personality types. And I do believe in astrology. I do think that's a science for people who really know it. But anyway, I'm just saying that because I was really obsessed with otherworldly things. I mean, I was not so interested in what the team sports, baseball and football. I mean, I did some sports, but the mundane things that, it's great if you want to do that. People are obsessed with their baseball team and their whatever Cub Scouts, and that never really interests me. It was like, there's something else going on here. I want to find out what it is. And so, if you read mystical literature, if you read like the perennial philosophies of like the greats, the Greek philosophers and even like the transcendentalists in American literature, they were well aware of this spiritual dimension. And so that was interesting to me, because it talked about a bigger picture of reality. When I interviewed Bruce Lipton, he said The Matrix is not really a feature film, it's a documentary. So we're in the Matrix, and yet we all have, I think that's why you like UFOs, because it's maybe your way out of the Matrix that's been really limiting our view of reality.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. UFOs being sort of like a North Star to find your way to a deeper sense of what this world that we live in. Alan, can you just adjust that microphone a little bit again, because I'm getting.
Sorry. Is that better now?
That's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was getting a little hissing there too. So, but that's what this is all about, right? So this book, I mean, you have Linda Moulton Howe, you have Darryl Anka, Nick Pope, Grant Cameron, Caroline Corey, Mary Rodwell, Henrietta Weeks, so many great people. What is the point of the book? Why did you put this together?
Well, thank you for asking that. So, I say no one really knows what's going on completely in the UFO phenomena. Everyone has a little piece of the truth. I talk to scientists, I talk to experiencers, I talk to researchers. They have their own little view of the reality, but you put all these people together, you get a mosaic. You get it's like the different parts of the elephant. You put that all together, and maybe you get an elephant, maybe you don't. So I wanted to create a collection of the best and brightest in the field. People have devoted their lives, really their lives, 40, 50 years of research and career challenges. John Mack, professor of psychiatry at Harvard, lost or almost lost everything by claiming or saying these people are not crazy or having these alien abduction experiences. They're not crazy. Something has happened to them. He put his career, his reputation, his livelihood on the line by standing up for what he believed. And how is that possible that people are having alien abductions? Visitors are coming in through the walls, taking people, bringing them back. That does not fit into anything that we can describe as our everyday reality.
Right, and it's not even it's not just about imagination, it's about science, how we understand how the material world works.
Right. It doesn't work that way. You can't go through walls. You can't take people out. You can't create missing time. But maybe John was brave enough to say, maybe these people are having a real experience and I'm just not evolved enough in my own conscious awareness to relate. So like lots of people, like if you had a cell phone 100 years ago and you said you talked to people around the world on this little device, this little plastic metal device, no one would believe you. And it would seem impossible because the worldview at that time was much more limited than it is now. So maybe, and John was he was very intelligent. I'm happy to have met him and hung out with him a little bit. And I have a great picture of me and him at coffee. But I mean, I didn't know him as well as that. But his mentor was this guy, Thomas Kuhn. You know who Thomas Kuhn is? You should look him up.
Psychiatrist?
No, he was a science historian. And he wrote the Theories of Scientific Revolution. And he says, when something new comes along that seems to be anomalous in the old worldview, it's usually ignored. It's put on the shelf and called an anomalous event and not talked about anymore. So that's
Sure.
And Kuhn says, no, anomalies are what's driving new discoveries and new possibilities. So in the 1800s, no one believed that rocks fell from the sky. It was impossible based on the science. And then suddenly someone said, well, I think I saw a rock fall from the sky, a meteorite, they're calling them now. But, and it took a long time for people to accept the fact that there were meteorites, or the guy that said, I think the continents are drifting apart, the continental drift. He was totally laughed out of his profession for years. I've got his name. But he said, isn't it interesting that looks like Africa and South America were connected? Everyone said, oh, you're just crazy for years. And
Pangea, right?
Right. And so that anomaly in this book by Thomas Kuhn, which is a really brilliant book, talks about pushing the modality of science a little bit towards more creativity. Like, let's include this. So Thomas Kuhn happened to be a friend of John Mack's family. And he said to Thomas Kuhn, who was elder, he said, Tom, I think I got one. I think I got a paradigm shifter here. Actually, Kuhn was one of the first ones to talk about the whole paradigm. I mean, I don't know if he coined the term, but he definitely brought it into popularity. So, and Kuhn said to John Mack, don't make a decision. Take in all the information with an open mind and then decide what's true, what's real, what seems possible. And John did that. And after listening to hundreds of people talk about their abduction experiences, unrelated, not knowing each other, he noticed there was a consistency of patterns there. And he said he could do two things. He could label it as a pathology, a new classification of pathology, or he can consider that possibly his level of experience was not as sophisticated or as expansive as what these people have had. And that's what he decided to do. He's validated these people's experience. And people would come to him as a psychiatrist and say, please tell me I'm crazy. Because I've had these beings come down, they visited me in my sleep, they took me out, and
it's like, give me a pill and let me take it away.
Give me a
Right.
bill and just
Yeah.
tell me I'm crazy, and then I'll be happy. And John would say something. He didn't say this exactly, but I have good news and bad news for you. The good news and bad news is you're not crazy, meaning
Yeah.
this stuff might really be happening. That's the good news, and it's the bad news. It's like this stuff is really happening. So he was a pioneer, and I was really fortunate to get him an old essay because I knew his archivist, because I knew John, and I knew some of the people he had worked with. So I got this previously unpublished essay to be in the book. And even though John had died about 20 years ago, it still fits in a very contemporary way, because the book is an arc. So I start with people like Nick Pope, former government investigator, worked for the British Ministry of Defense as a civilian investigator. He's making excuses for the reason government's not telling people why there's things in the sky. And he starts out the book saying every book needs to have a villain, and he is the villain by saying that governments have good reason to keep things from the public. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
But to have a really comprehensive overview, I didn't have to agree with everyone I put in that book.
Sure.
And then we have Grant Cameron in chapter 2, who says, the theory of wow, he wrote, that's the name of his chapter. He says these ships are doing things, they're appearing, and so people can just open their minds to like, wow, something's happening here. And he says in that chapter, because he's interviewed lots of contactees, if you've seen a UFO, you're part of the phenomena. You were meant to see it. So I'm curious how many listeners and viewers to this program actually have seen UFOs. Because
it's
yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead, Alan. Sorry.
No, I want to hear what you think.
Well, what I was going to say is that, speaking for myself, and I think a lot of others, I had seen a distant object in the sky, a UFO. It wasn't, I couldn't see a craft per se, but it was the behavior of this thing moving, right? And then here I am with a lifelong near obsession with the topic, right? So it's inextricable, the experience of seeing it and the manifesting of that experience into the not just my life, but the life of other people. And I think that happens to a lot of us.
But why did you get so obsessed with the subject? That's what I'm interested in.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, there were so many influences: movies, television, X-Files, sightings. But when I saw the UFO at around 12 years old, I think it was. After that, I had gotten this little notepad, and I started interviewing family and friends, and saying, "Hey, have you seen a UFO? What was it like?" Blah blah blah. It was more like a compulsion. It was like it was just something that grabbed me, and I just wouldn't let go.
Well, my theory about this, and maybe you might not like to hear this, but I'll tell you anyway, that you probably had a much more intimate contact, and I don't know, I'm just guessing, than you might suspect. Because, people see a lot of things, but the people I've talked to, some of them just don't remember their really firsthand contact experience because it's been blocked out. Maybe it didn't happen to you, but the obsession part or the compulsion, to me, suggests, and maybe you should be regressed, that should be a whole other show, but that I think there's more to your story, mister, than you than you really suspect.
I don't know.
And
we'll see. But I'll tell you what though, like faces like this, they don't frighten. They don't frighten me.
Well, there you go. Why is that on your desk?
Okay. This is a postcard that my wife and I picked up in our trip to Roswell about, gosh, I want to say 14 years ago.
I'm just curious if you ever want to be regressed. I know some really good regressionists, Barbara Lamb, Yvonne Smith. They're going to be at Contact in the Dead. Where do you live? Which part of the country you live in?
New York, close to New York City.
All right. Well, I'm going to be in New York City. Actually, I'm speaking in New York City on June 11th at the Alchemist Kitchen.
Oh,
if you
really?
want to come. The Alchemist Kitchen. It's on Crosby Street in Soho, 5 p.m. Sunday, June 11th. I'm speaking about. Well, I'm going to cover a lot of stuff here, but you come and
is it going to be more metaphysical talk or?
No, well, it depends what people are interested in. I mean, there is
Mhm.
a whole metaphysical component to this, and the talk I'm giving at the conference Contact in the Desert coming up this weekend is about there's the ETA, the end extraterrestrial hypothesis. That's what people are calling the fact that maybe these things are from another planet or star
Mhm.
system. And then I'm talking about the interdimensional hypothesis,
Mhm.
the IDH. Yeah.
Okay, so and some of that is touched on a little bit in the book as well.
Right. Right.
But I do want to have my notes. So right at the beginning, there's a
Uh-huh.
quote, and I think this ties into perfectly with what you're just talking about. Trigent Burrow, a quote: "Whenever organic truth is denied its expression in reality, it will invent its expression in the realm of fantasy." And I
Right.
I just love that quote.
I
So
love it too because there's been hundreds of movies
yeah.
about UFOs because we've been denied the truth of its reality. So the suppression of truth
Mhm.
is inverted. I mean, I don't think Turgid, whatever his name is, was Burgent. I think I know I
It's
quoted
a
him.
I don't know,
Tygent.
Trigent Burrow.
Yeah, Trigent
Yep.
Burrow. He's actually a
Mhm.
student of Freud.
Okay.
He was part of that Freudian group there in Vienna, but he wasn't talking about UFOs. He was talking about just everyday trauma. And when that's
Mhm.
denied, it's created a fantasy world about it. So when, let's say, you've had a contact and you didn't know about it, you don't realize it on a conscious level,
Mhm.
you become obsessed with it subconsciously. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get that. Yeah, at an individual level, and we see that in visual arts, any kind of arts. The subconscious mind, trauma can be reflected in art, but also in this case, what if there's another reality? And I was thinking also in terms of like the archetype, like more Jungian, the broader spectrum.
Yeah.
So collectively as a society, we know there's a deeper reality, and
Mhm.
so we become creative in our imaginations. Kind of bring forth the calling, you know,
Mm.
via art and creativity to this other reality.
That's a really great way to talk about art because I'm writing about art and consciousness and UFOs, and
Hmm.
you're right. Art is a way that people supplement the reality within not even a fantasy, but I would say a deflection into the imaginal realms
Hmm.
or the imaginary realm. But it's a reality that is not culturally accepted, but art reveals the deeper truth of a world that I think really exists in the interior of our being.
Hmm.
The abstract worlds, the colors, the inner realities. Actually,
Yeah.
the outer realities of art reflect the inner realities of consciousness. That's one way I would put it. But thank you. That's a good observation.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that quote. I'm hanging on to that one for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but
Mm,
so one thing I also wanted to, because I don't want to run
yeah.
out of time.
No,
One thing.
I'm enjoying this. We can go for, as long as you want. Yeah,
Okay,
we
great.
can
Thank
go.
you. So one thing that I've always kind of struggled with, and Linda Moulton Howe touches on this in her essay in the book, is this theory about some kind of connection between extraterrestrials and Nazis. And for me, I've always found that extraordinarily unnerving because, and it could just be me projecting onto it, but in my mind, there is, perhaps at least for some people who hear this, it's taking a little bit of the onus off of the responsibility of those humans, those Nazis, in the horrific actions and
Mhm.
decisions that they were making. That's where I find it unsettling. You know.
Well, I don't think it really takes the onus. I mean, the fact that the Nazis were doing this as manipulations of ETs, is that what you mean? Possibly?
Well, that they were in kind of a collusion, that these extraterrestrials were in contact with certain people, behind the scenes.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. I think those, because I think actually my last lifetime was not pleasant. It was in one of those. I mean, and who knows? I can't prove that, but
Hmm.
I think that was actually the lowest point in human civilization, World War II, and the atrocities. And of course, they're still happening.
Hmm.
But no, I don't think it makes people less responsible for their actions. I think the ETs, maybe they were manipulating the Nazis. Linda Moulton Howe says there's these forces fighting for control, and Nazis were acting out the agendas of some of these ETs. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
true or not, but I still think people have free will not to follow orders if they're given. It's like, I think there could be something to that, but I think people really have to take the responsibility for themselves. Just like now, we have to clean up our planet before we're really going to have company here. It's like we can't expect like these ETs to show up and give us free energy, clean up our atmosphere. I mean, maybe they are doing that on some level, but we've made a mess of a really beautiful planet, one of my favorite planets, and it's like
I don't hear that often, Alan.
no,
One of my favorite.
I know,
Yeah.
but I think it is a beautiful planet, and I think the
Mhm.
diversity of environments, like ecology zones, probably
Mhm.
it could be more diverse than other planets.
Yeah.
Or less diverse. I mean, what we see of different Mars, for instance, I think that did have an atmosphere. I did think it had a civilization. You could look at the face on Mars and the pyramids on Mars to see, and also there was definitely water there, and that was something that some people said destroyed on purpose. Whatever. I think there are lots of planets out there, but this is really diverse, and I do think life is abundant throughout the cosmos. I mean, look at it in New York City. The grass grows between the sidewalks. You can't keep life down. DNA, and this is something that Gary Nolan also talks about, the molecule DNA and its sophistications of permutations, its complexity, according to him, makes it about 9 billion years old. The Earth is only 4.5 billion years old. So DNA precedes life on Earth. So it just, I mean, who said that we're a freak of nature? This is just one limited point of view, and there's no basis to go on that. It's like looking at an island in the distance saying, no, I don't think anyone lives there. It has the same vegetation as this island. It's in the same kind of ocean that we're in, but no, it couldn't be anyone there because we hadn't seen anyone come this way. But that's also the lie, because there's been lots of ships. If you look at that, listen to that Gary Nolan interview again, he talks about crash retrieval. I mean, come on, this is disclosure. This is what we've been waiting to hear. Someone inside the government saying, guess what? We have company. We're not alone. We have never been alone. And we have bodies, and he doesn't say bodies, but we have craft to prove it. So what's the problem is that the world is not, well, they're getting more and more ready. There are more sightings worldwide. There's more, like we're saying, there's a crack in the government structure that's held back the truth. We're getting whistleblowers coming out in public. There was just a bill passed that allows whistleblowers going back to 1945 to come out, if there's anyone still around, and say, yes, I've involved in these secret programs. So we're at a real exciting turning point in human history. Really, really are. And I don't know. I can't think of a more exciting thing to talk about or invest. I don't know why well, you're into it, but I don't know why everyone's not into it, because, and the only reason I can think is that they've been, brainwashed or just dulled down to miss this moment of real extraordinary expansion.
I think, to a degree, but I also think that, for instance, people like watching murder mysteries or detective series, real life documentaries, and we appreciate the work that those people do,
Yeah.
but not everybody has the the desire, number one, to do
Yeah.
that, or the wherewithal. And I think that something like this, it's a long game investigation. It's a long game. I mean, think of all the wonderful ufologists that have come and gone, that have done
Right.
lots of really good work, and they never
Right.
got to see full disclosure in the way, in technicolor, the way that we hope it to be. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of people are like standing on the sideline and letting others do it, and then they're going about their lives watching shows or listening to podcasts.
Yeah, and some people just aren't interested. Like I know for some reason, whatever, my family's like, okay, that's your thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go watch the football game, which is okay. I mean, people can do that, and everyone, it's what makes horse racing. Everyone has different interests. And so, but for me, and maybe for you, and maybe for the people listening, this is a really key moment
Mm-hmm.
in the awakening.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's definitely the most exciting time probably since, gosh, I don't know, maybe the early 90s or 80s, when the whole Roswell story broke.
Right.
So this is very, very exciting. If I had to guess, I'm thinking maybe within 10 years we'll get there. We'll get to that point. Hopefully, if we're lucky, it'll be sooner than that. But that brings us back to this idea that humans are supposed to be getting primed by these entities. But one of the things that comes up with a lot of these experiencer stories are that there might be different entities that seem to be pulling strings or contacting people. Like Valiant Thor is one that people are like, oh, Valiant Thor knows all these things, blah blah blah. Arcturians, and it's like, well, which one's the right narrative? Because even though there's a lot of major overlapping similarities, there are differences between different experiencer stories.
Right. There is no one narrative. There is no true narrative. There is no. That's why I wrote this book from 12 different perspectives, because there is no overriding narrative. I mean, to me, I see a lot of similarities in the essays in this book and a lot of experiences, but there's also places where there's disagreement. I don't even know people throw around the Valiant Thor story, but I tend not to believe it. What is the Valiant Thor story?
Valiant Thor is an ET entity that is, contacting people and then having psychic communication with them. Apparently, someone that I know, Margie K, who runs the Next Network, she is very sure, and she is a cognizant, sane, normal, balanced, everyday functioning human, just like so many others who say, I have this contact. I don't know what it is, but this is what it's telling me it is.
Well, I'm a little suspicious of the Valiant Thor thing, but I'm not saying it's not true. Hasn't been my experience. There's other things that have been my experience, like abduction, whatever that means. It sounds so weird just to say it. And also in a dream state, being presented with this little, I guess, hybrid being that was probably my genetics. And I mean, it was only in a dream state. I can't say that I was conscious, but I can say that I never forgot that experience. I was woken up. I was sleeping. I think it was 1988. It was a year after that abduction trip that I did. And then I was woken up sort of in this dream state, but still in a dream state, and given this little creature, it looked like a deer with big eyes. And I said to myself, this is weird. Well, I had no connection with this. And maybe that was a dream. I mean, usually you forget dreams, but I've never forgotten that dream. I can still actually recall that moment and where I was and the time of night and the sensation of that. So, I mean, people may not believe that, but yeah. Right.
Well, but that's different, right? Because you're coming out of that and you're saying, I'm not sure what it is. It felt more like a dream. Whereas others are saying, this was real. What I experienced was as real can get. But you also do hear that, I've taken mushrooms in the past, and you can have that experience. That can feel very real.
Mhm.
And maybe it is. Maybe part of our reality beyond what we know is like this expansion of consciousness.
Yeah.
So I'm maybe sitting in this room the entire time,
Mhm.
but that other level of conscious experience might just be real within that realm, that conscious realm, if that makes
I
sense.
agree. No, everyone's living out their own level of reality.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably some mundane examples that you can create, like no one could run a 4-minute mile,
Hmm.
if you remember that, until Roger Bannister did that. It was impossible for probably 50, 60 years. I couldn't and now people are doing that in high school, I mean,
Hmm.
so it's like a barrier of reality is broken through, or revelation or a connection. And now maybe lots of people hear Valiant Thor speak to them. I don't know. Or people
Yeah.
are, so there's levels of unfoldment of consciousness. I mean,
Hmm.
people never even talked about consciousness 20 years ago. I mean, no one even knows what that word means because it's still
Yeah.
floating around.
But I would argue those of us who have tripped know a little bit more through the actual experience, because
Oh, yeah.
you go, oh my god, there it keeps going and going and going, and you feel it, right? So I think that, and people who meditate a lot,
Mhm,
transcendentalism, have you referenced earlier,
mhm.
I think people can get to a place where they can at least get a sense of
Well,
what that bigger reality is.
Well, that's why, the Age of Aquarius, Aquarius is the water bearer, but its sign it's an air sign with waves. So we're talking about waves of thought. I mean, the
Mhm.
Aquarian age is the age of consciousness. And so, and I think it was ushered in, the dawning of the age of Aquarius, like the song said, was the 1960s, where people started to meditate. People
Totally.
started to
Yep.
do LSD and hallucinogens. People really got a sense of what consciousness was outside of maybe India, where that was a kind of tradition, but it became mainstream, the study of consciousness. You get Ram Dass going from
Mm.
dropping LSD with Timothy Leary to going to India and saying, I've gotten higher with my guru than
Mhm.
he ever did on LSD. And so consciousness is it's so this Aquarian age, this age
Mhm.
of consciousness, is looking at things from a perspective that we didn't 100 years ago. There may have been some advanced masters, but mostly it wasn't this Aquarian phenomena that is now kind of taking hold. I mean, everyone's talking about it's mainstream. There's consciousness studies in universities. It's so this is part of a new epoch. It's a new time. It's a new world view where, you get people like Amit Goswami saying consciousness is the foundation of all reality. It's the foundation. Even Max Planck, one of the I guess inventors of quantum physics, says it's all consciousness. And so,
Mm.
and quantum physics bears that out. Quantum physics says the observer affects reality. It affects the quantum state. You get great things going on with Joe Dispenza and his quantum field, people having
Mhm.
miraculous cures because they're focusing consciousness on the quantum field of possibilities. So, a consciousness could be another name for God, or it could be an application.
Mhm.
When I talk to Deepak Chopra, and I've interviewed him a bunch of times, he always says, "Oh, it's all consciousness." When I told him about this book about ET, I said,
Mhm.
"What's the big deal? What's here is everywhere, and what's not here is
Mhm.
nowhere." I say, "No," and it's all consciousness. He said, "I say no, Deepak. What is the application of consciousness? It's an app.
Mhm.
It's not a thing. It's an app. How do we use consciousness to perceive the bigger reality, like you said, that's hidden
Mhm.
from sight, that maybe just the mystics." Well, the mystical realities are becoming mainstream
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time. People are writing to me, or talking to me. They had this awakened experience. We're not talking about ETs. They've just woken up to like a Kundalini experience, or they've just seen auras, or they've they had near-death experience. They've seen different levels. So there's a dynamics of this time and age, and ETs, all that's included in this expansion of reality, because I see it as a spiritual expansion. It's not unidentified flying objects. It's unexplained aerial phenomena. It's a phenomena, basically, not an object. The phenomena has an effect on us. So that's why I think it's so exciting. We're changing the modality of thought, the way we think of the world, the way we look at ourselves. The book is really Making Contact is more about making contact with ourselves. Forget the ETs. What's the big deal? There's many races and they all have interests. I mean, I'm not saying forget them, but the big thing is, who are we? What's our divine potential? How are we infinite? How do we make contact with the self, with others, with the earth and the cosmos? That's the kind of encapsulation of the book.
Yeah, I've always been in favor of UFO over UAP, but now that you put it that way, that the phenomena being representative much more than a object caught on a FLIR camera, that it's so much bigger than that. And that's something that I've always suspected with this, is that the scientific approach of, well, how come we can't catch them yet? We've got 1 billion cameras and cell phones now. How come we can't catch them? Well, if we're talking about an insect or some kind of rare bird, then you're right. We probably should have by now. But if it's a consciousness, if there's some other thing going on here, it probably is not ready to be seen in full force quite yet. And why do you think there's this sort of gradual acclimation? Why do you feel that whatever the phenomena or the ETs are, why they're doing that?
Because people slowly have to wake up. They're not landing on the White House lawn, because some people are ready for it, but some people are even denying what they've seen. Like, you saw something, someone else might have said something, saw the same thing and said, oh, it's nothing. We've been very dumbed down by our culture. This goes back to what I love, Terence McKenna. He said, culture is not your friend.
Right.
Meaning it makes you think within a limited box. It's what William Blake said. The doors of perception are infinite, but we've been taught to see through a narrow chink in the cavern that we're living in. So people see this way. This is their reality. And if you said, no, there's something outside, they would say no. It's like, the parable of Plato's cave. Like, the people who lived in the cave thought their shadows were reality until someone walks out of the cave. And guess what? Those shadows are really an aspect of who we are. So, and the guys in the cave that know it's impossible. You're hallucinating. You're making it up. So, humans can be inflexible, but we also need to stretch beyond our belief system. And this is the most exciting thing about the alien or the UFO. Maybe they're not even real, but it's pushing us to see what else is possible. I do think they're real. I do think there are beings here. I do think they're maybe they're at a different vibratory frequency. So they're coming in and out of our reality, because we're very static in our frequency, but we are evolving to pick up. You can't pick up Wi-Fi on an AM radio. It's just not set to that frequency. And so when we evolve this incredible mechanism, the brain, which is a multidimensional, this transducer of frequencies, when we evolve that to pick up higher frequencies, then we hopefully will cognize a higher vibration of being. There could be beings standing right here. You could have been abducted, Alan Smith, back then when you were 12 years old, but you don't have the bandwidth right now I'm not saying it's true, I'm just making it up, but the bandwidth to
I need to upgrade my
integrate.
bandwidth.
But when you start to consider the possibilities and maybe go back, because you never forgot that moment at 12 years old when you saw something in the sky.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a key for me. Like, guess what? There's more to the story. But
Yeah.
so
But
yeah,
let me say this before we finish up.
yeah.
So one of the things that I struggle with a little bit, because I speak to a lot of experiencers, some of which are my friends,
Mhm.
and the way I look at religion, being an ex-Catholic, I see that these are stories that were told by people I don't know for thousands of years and passed
Mhm.
down. And to my mind, and especially as I grow older as an adult, I know that I can't just believe something that somebody tells me
Right.
just because they think it's true.
Yeah.
And yet it's so compelling. The
Well,
collective stories of
it's
today. Yeah.
I think it's compelling because you have a piece of it. If you didn't have that experience at 12, maybe it would just be, oh, they're just telling story. But like Grant Cameron says, if you've seen something, you're part of the phenomena. So it's compelling because it compels something in you to wake up to a larger reality. And maybe nothing, and maybe you just saw something and it's like, oh, that's interesting. But it made a dent in your reality, whether could have just been a strange, aircraft or whatever. You saw something. I don't know what it was. But you know what? I believe you've seen something. So the stories, a lot of people make up stories because humans like to tell stories. And sometimes you hear a story which says, I believe you. I mean, I believe everyone. I can't vouch for their truth. Some people say they've been to the moon, whatever. It's not my experience, but if that's their reality, I mean, I have to base it on my experience, I suppose. So I believe some people and I don't believe other people. So I think it's everything we hear is based on our experience. So the compelling part is that it kind of connects with something in there that sparks an aliveness. And that's why we stop and just have coffee and UFOs one day, because it's about our reality.
Yeah. All right. I like the way you wrapped that up, Alan. Thank you so much. Everybody, check out Alan's book, Making Contact. And of course, Contact in the Desert is coming up this week. Alan, if you could leave us with just one thought, what would it be?
That reality is not what we've been told. It's not even what we think. It's not even what we can imagine. There's something that we're birthing into that humanity will wake up and realize everything we thought before was the illusion, and this next level, and I think it'll be a collective awakening, and it's happening here and there. This next level will realize that we're really one humanity. We're all connected in consciousness. This is the idealistic utopian version, and that there's something really fantastic about incarnation, being on the planet, using your mind, body, spirit to have experiences that expand consciousness in general. I mean, I could go on and on, but there's
let's
something.
leave it there.
I'm just saying there's something really exciting going on. Keep looking up and you may see something. Get my book. You get it on Amazon, get it at Barnes & Noble. Let me know what you think. Email me at newrealities@earthlink.net. Thank you so much, Alan Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. All right, and everyone out there, thank you so much. If you like this podcast, please comment down below, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you listen to the podcast, please leave a review and rate wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you so much, and until next time, everyone, be well.